Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Why the Warren Commission may be the greatest fraud perpetrated on the American public. Now your host, Len Osanek.
Researchers and students of the assassination are familiar with the term magic bullet. This is Commission Exhibit 399, CE 399. This bullet is in such pristine condition, only a fool or an apologist for the Warren Commission would try to convince anyone that CE 399 hit anything. Take a good look at the bullet and evidence, and then compare that to the damage done. Look at the wounds. Look at the x-rays. The Warren Commission has more lead and evidence recovered from Governor Connolly than is missing from Commission Exhibit 399. Normally, you would say, that doesn't make sense. Well, let's get a professional perspective. Respected forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht explains why CE 399 is called magic.
This is Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, forensic pathologist. The single bullet theory is the sine qua non of the Warren Commission report. The single bullet theory has one bullet going into Kennedy's back, exiting from the front of his neck, re-entering John Connolly's back, exiting from the front of his chest, re-entering the back of John Connolly's right wrist, exiting from the front of the right wrist, re-entering the left thigh, and falling out spontaneously from the left thigh, and winding up as the stretcher bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, that was fortuitously found. This bullet, in its store-bought condition, weighs 161 grains. As it was found, it weighed 158.6 grains, a loss of 2.4 grains, which is exactly 1.5% of the original mass, the weight of the bullet. And yet we have fragments found in 4 anatomic locations. I myself spoke personally with Audrey Bell, the head nurse at Parkland Hospital, who was there with the operations that were performed on Connolly. She turned over 3 or 4 pieces of metal to the FBI. There's no way in the world that you can have a bullet that leaves pieces of itself in these anatomic locations and loses only 1.5% of its original weight. The condition of the bullet, this bullet which broke Connolly's right fifth rib, destroying 4 inches of the bone, which produced a comminuted fracture of the distal end of the radius, one of the 2 large bones from the elbow to the wrist, and a very big solid bone, and a 6'4" heavy bone guy like John Connolly. And yet we have that bullet emerging in pristine condition, no indentation of any kind other than its base, and that's from the impact of the firing mechanism. The nose, the cone of the bullet remain completely in place. And then the trajectory, the bullet hits Kennedy and is moving from, according to the Warren Commission, back to front, from right to left, and from up downward. It emerges then from Kennedy's anterior midline of the neck. Somehow it manages to swing over 18 to 20 inches to the right, hits Connolly behind the right armpit, not the left shoulder, and it then proceeded downward through his chest at an angle of about 22 degrees or so, emerged below the level of the nipple in a downward trajectory. Go back to the Zapruder film, look when he is struck, and you'll see him waving his white Texas Stetson hat, and it is above the level of the nipple by far. It is at shoulder level. So that bullet emerging from his chest comes upward, swings around, smashes into the back of his wrist, exits from the wrist, and then continues downward at a 45-degree angle into the left thigh. And a bullet that penetrates into soft tissues does not just work its way out.
This is being taken care of. The bullet is in the leg. It hasn't been removed. This is a very insignificant factor.
That's the single bullet theory, and it is the most absurd piece of nonsense. It would have been presented in the courtroom, would have been destroyed.
I did not hear the second shot, the one that hit me. I understand there's some question in the minds of the experts about whether or not we could both have been hit with the same bullet, and that was the first bullet. I just don't happen to believe that. I don't believe it, and I will believe it. Again, I heard the first shot. I recognized it for what I thought it was. I had time to turn to try to see what had happened. I was in the process of turning again before I felt the impact of a bullet. Now, obviously, if the bullet that hit me before I could hear it, I was never conscious of the sound of the second bullet at all. I never heard the second bullet.
It should be noted that efforts were made to duplicate the accomplishments of Commission Exhibit 399. And one of my favorite slides, the most favorite slide that I have in my collection, shows the bullets lined up, the bullets that they fired in the cotton wadding, striking nothing, and then bullets fired through goat carcasses, breaking one rib in order to simulate Conley's rib fracture, and bullets fired through human cadavers to simulate Conley's wrist fracture. They picked the bullets that had the least amount of damage. They could not come up with a bullet that came anywhere near the pristine, intact condition of that bullet. Other efforts were made by Army ballistics people and others in order to try to replicate accomplishments that are attributed to the magic bullet, and they failed. The Dr. Vincent Gwynn was called in supposedly to show that the fragment that was recovered came from 399 to the exclusion of every other bullet in the world. That has now been shown and scientifically proven and accepted by the omnipotent FBI that this is false, that you cannot make such a determination, that you cannot say that this fragment came from that particular bullet to the exclusion of all other bullets and so on. All the efforts and all the attempts to retroactively justify, substantiate, corroborate the basis for the single bullet theory have proven to be inadequate and scientifically untenable.
So there you have it. Governor Connolly's surgeon, Dr. Robert Shaw, states at 4:45 p.m., the bullet, not a fragment, the bullet is still in the governor's leg. So how can it be found on a stretcher by Daryl Tomlinson, who, by the way, said it had no blood or tissue on it at all? And that stretcher was for a boy with a broken arm. That's why they call it magic.
Stay tuned for the next installment as we expose week after week 50 lies the Warren Commission would like you to believe.